Welcome back to day 4 of the URI guitar build. Today, we're going to be finishing up the back because I've got this all rounded out. I just pulled the edges over. It was pretty quick and easy. And I just kind of want to get the back off my bench and just know that that's done, ready to go. I've got a little bit of glue squeeze out. I'm not going to worry about that too much. I kind of don't mind that look, believe it or not. I mean, you can clean up as much as you want, but it doesn't bother me. So we'll get this cleaned up and we'll get the surfaces of the sides together and get them prepped up. And that's pretty easy. We're gonna just take a plane and smooth it all off. There's a lot of woodworking that goes into that, kind of. Not really, but kind of. So first things first, let's start with the easy one, which is getting this ready to go. So what I've done is I've used my template to trace out the line of the theoretical guitar, which is not exact, but it's pretty close. And so what I like to do is use my ruler and just kind of go in here and measure in, you know, some distance. And this is up to you. You can kind of change the tonality of the back with the distance that you go in. So if you want a little bit more bass response, you can bring this narrower, or if you want a little bit more treble response, you can bring this out a little wider. But it doesn't make a huge amount of difference. And I kind of like the middle to be a little bit looser than the long areas here, just because it's already a tight area, so I'll go a little further in here. Now, I go about 65-ish millimeters in from the theoretical outline. That always changes. And the important thing to remember is that it doesn't actually matter all that much. What matters is that you're consistent and you kind of understand what's going on. What I want to do is leave a little bit of a shelf here for those to go into the linings, because if you remember, we put those solid bent linings in. This is the easiest way I've found to do this. This is actually a slightly tapered wedge, although it doesn't have to be tapered, it could be flat, and a cutoff marker. This one is just happens to be a Japanese one, but you could use one of the disc style ones, but this is the easiest. And I'll show you how to use this later on the sides when we go to mate the back to the sides, but for now, I really want this to be at that height, which is, I guess I forgot to mention, the same height as this. So this way, all I know is that when I scratch down to here, I cut down to the line, and everything just happens to fit. In order to do this, there's 2 ways we can go about it. There's using a straight chisel, where you kind of just come in and hog off chunks of it. And I actually like to put this here. Every so often I'll have to make a new one of these. I'll let you know, it's been about 20 years. But just kind of come in like this. And you don't have to get one of those fancy curved chisels. It's a nice little gimmick to separate you from your money. If you know how to use a chisel, you'll understand that that's actually not going to work well at all. I've never used one of the fancy ones, but I have used enough chisels to know how to use them. And yes, my chisel's kind of dull, but it's sharp enough for now. So I'm kind of close, and you kind of have to be careful about getting down here. And you might get tear out. You want to make sure that it's even on both sides. It's kind of a pain. And it doesn't take a long time, but it takes longer than I want it to take. So I'm going to show you the scary method that I use. For you, I suggest this method. Let me be perfectly clear. I suggest this method. But I'll show you the way that I do it because it's a lot quicker and it allows me just to kind of move on, and I know that every single cut is perfect. So let's actually go over to my extra table saw right here. So this is a ginormous dado blade. It's absolutely terrifying. I use this to cut the slots for my headstock, for the ramps, and when I use that, I'll dismount it from here and use it on my other table saw where I've got a different sled. But for here, I have this massively scary chunk covering the blade, and I never touch the setting. And I have this set to exactly the right height. I know that this is actually completely encased, and I'm going to have to actually work really hard to get my fingers into this. Well, this is scary and terrifying to look at. It's actually really, really simple. What I do is I'll take this and put it onto here and slide it, holding it down flat, and just kind of check where I'm at as I'm taking away all the excess material that, well, ought not be there. This is loud. It's scary. Let me get some ears on and get my dust collection hooked up to this. This methodology will really never let you down if you don't give up on it. It took a bit of time to figure out the right way to do this without having a lot of blowout and kind of understanding the directionality of the wood. It's really not going to give you a runaround, nor will it ever actually hurt you if you do it right. All right, so let's go flatten out the sides. All right, so that's right. I like to work from the flat side first. And remember, we left these slightly proud, so you can kind of come in with your standard block plane to just knock all this excess off. But because this is the flat side and we did this off of the hand plane, believe it or not, one of the fastest ways I've found is to come in here and just attack it with a chisel and use your hand plane to get it the last bit down. But at this moment, I realize that I'm actually getting ahead of myself, because if you recall last time, and the only thing I've done is taken off the clamps and threw them into my box. I just kind of put all my clamps away into the two respective boxes. And at this point, there's some glue still stuck in there, and there's some residue here. So before I take off too much up here, I'm going to just take some simple 120 sandpaper and come in here and just sand off all the excess mess, because I just want that gone. I don't want it here. And once I've got that all cleaned up, and I'll finish that up later. Where do I go? After I've got that all finished up, I'm going to go and take a scraper and use that to clean up the vast majority of this inside, to remove whatever glazing happened during the bending process, any glue drips, or well, anything of that nature. This is my scraper. This is, the scraper that just won't die. And I've got it sharpened up on this edge. And so I'll start in with my corner, and there's a reason why this is toenailed, is so I can just really carefully come in and scrape out the glue. This only takes a moment or two. Have I mentioned how much scraping actually happens on a guitar? And I feel like I use my scrapers 10 times more than pretty much anything else at this point in time. And I still don't go through them, even though I use the barbaric bench scraper method. The trick is to not mess up. So we're just gonna, on at least this top side, we're gonna just bring it all the way down to this line to make it flat. I'm just using my chisel to start it off, just because it makes it so much quicker. And here the trick to not mess up is to place it ever so slightly at this angle, not at this angle, because you want this to be touching down. Because, you know, really, inside only two of us will know what's going on. But if you do it wrong, then we're both going to be wrong on the inside. So now that that's roughly down, now this part makes it go a lot easier. To really smooth out everything that you've done. Just like that, it's smoothed out. Now, is it perfectly down to the edge? No. We're just here to smooth out the rough edges. And speaking of the rough edges, I made this out of an old, it's a belt sander. It was too far used to be used on my belt sander, but, you know, there's still a lot of grit on here. And I think I made this like 30 years ago. Does a great job of flattening everything out. So I'm going to do the other side, and then we'll get to actually getting the top starting to fit. Now that that's done, we've got the whole thing kind of sanded out flush and flat. So I understand that this was made to some arbitrary length, and I find about half the time my cross brace intersects with this. So we're going to have to cut that off. I'm not too worried about this end because I always try to get it close up to the top brace itself. So now we need to do the layout for our top, which is why I actually needed to get this all leveled out. So my bench, due to no fault of my own, is a disaster. I really don't want to scrape up and scratch up the bench. So one of the reasons I love working on these melamine tables is that they don't hold a lot of scratches, and you can feel whatever's going on with it. And if there's anything that's kind of a high spot or a glue nurdle, that pops right off. So there. Now I know that my bench is clean. I'm not going to worry too terribly much about this. Good drop as always. Gonna dust this off. And I actually, believe it or not, I like to give a little bit of a scrape right here along the edge. So that way I can see exactly where my center line is. And this is going to involve a lot of scooting around, and in retrospect, I should have done that first. The trick is, don't make extra work for yourself. So sometimes you can take a line with a ruler and mark from edge to edge. And right now I'm just kind of going visually. Generally it gets to be pretty accurate pretty quickly. And if you recall, we made that, but I've got myself lined up on my center line from here all the way down to the line that we made earlier on the top with our fret rule. So that tells me that this position is correct. I'm going to gently turn this around, not picking it up, which is why I was neurotic about cleaning off my bench. In order to move this over, instead of scooching it, which gives it the potential of squiggling from somewhere else where there's a slightly higher amount of friction, I'm going to put my fingers onto the top, which is on the bench, and I'm going to use my thumbs to lift up and scooch it over, so I'm pivoting around this point. And if I do it right, I only have to check 3 or 4 times. Once more as a double check from this side to make sure it didn't move, which it didn't. Yay. Now, one of the things that I like to do is to understand exactly where my outline is, because sometimes the sides don't exactly conform to the mold, and you know, I like to build a little bit more organically. So I'll take a pencil, and you'll often see me just kind of do a little scribble on some sandpaper. I'll create an extra tight point, so that way I know exactly where it is, because the width of a pencil line is a lot bigger than you think. I'll very gently try to keep this bit against the corner by rotating, and an exact inside outline of the inside. I like to trace this onto the guitar so I know exactly the real estate that I have to work with. And if you do this right, your glue squeeze out's going to cover this up, so you don't even have to worry about removing it, which is pretty cool. But I like to know exactly where my blocks are. I'll give a little line up on the neck block, just right at the very edge. Now I know exactly where my top is going to be. I know where everything is going to fall, so that way I can start planning on everything else. So there we go. There's our top. Most of our side. Whoops, missed a spot. That's okay. And so now we can start the brace layout. Now I'm going to use a double cross brace like Fleda, so I'm actually going to be looking to put one here and then one here. I'm going to be kind of Ramirez-like under here, cross brace here, and then these two over here. One of the things about doing this is that sometimes I have to be versatile, and I've got a plan at the beginning of the day, and much like getting into a fist fight, all plans go out the window as soon as you get hit in the face. And I'm not saying that anything went wrong, because nothing did. But I just got a call that, you know, my son has to go somewhere. So I'm not going to be able to do what I wanted to do, but I still want to make good use of my time. And one of the things that I use as kind of like a filler is making the fingerboard, because it doesn't take a whole lot of time if you do it right. So this is a piece of ebony I've had for probably 20 years, and I try to have all of my stuff be aged at least 7 years before I use it, which basically has to do with the math and how long it takes the humidity to permeate out of this based off of the density and so on and so forth. I'll do a video on that later. Needless to say, I've already kind of prepped it. I ran it through my planer just to knock off all the high points. So I'm going to start in on cutting the fret slots and shaping this, just because it's something I can do fairly quickly and make use of the time, since I'm not going to be able to get anything glued up before I have to go. First things first, I'm going to straighten up this side of the fingerboard. So we'll just do this on the joiner. It doesn't take very long. We're just going for a straight surface. All this is going to be cut away. This is going to be scraped and so on and so forth. Nothing fancy. Just for the record, this one's about 8.5 millimeters thick. I like to work somewhere between 7.5, 8.5, so that way if my guitars ever have to be refretted, there's enough material here to be done again. and it gives me room to do the geometry. Now, to do this, I'm gonna take this over to my other table saw and set it up. And I know a lot of people are saying, hey, why aren't you using a riving knife on your table saw? Two major reasons. First of all, it never came with one. I mean, it did, but not when I got it. I think that the riving knife was lost somewhere around 70 years ago. So, that, and I use a bunch of different thicknesses of blades. Now, I have a whole rack of stuff mounted to the side where I'm constantly changing between thickness and widths of blades and diameters and so on and so forth. And if you're using a riving blade, that's great, and you should, if you're doing the same cut on the same thing every single time. By the way, don't drop that nut. It falls into oblivion, and while I do have dust collection on this, it really keeps the spray in the room down. It doesn't actually really keep too much from getting in there. I'm just going to give this a little pinch and swirl. And I'm going to get this fret saw set up for what I need. On mine, I just go by feel. You can take your fret tang and measure if you want here, but I know that depending on what I'm using and how high up, I know that down here I'm free, and this position for my wheel gives me the fret slot depth that I want. So next up, I'm going to get my fret rule and my jigs. And I can hear you saying, "Oh, Marshall, but you say you don't use jigs." No, I just don't like a lot of jigs. I like to use jigs for tedious tasks that become repetitive and are crucial, and I don't want to think. So I've got this pin which goes into that machined aluminum fret rule. I'm going to get this clamped down. When you clamp it down, every time you reset a jig, doesn't matter if you used it yesterday or the day before, things move, they change, and you don't want stuff to go wrong. So I just like to make sure that I'm running perfectly square to the blade, which I am, because I'm using my novelty oversized square. The next step is to kind of figure out where I want my fingerboard to go. Now this is a fairly dark fingerboard with a little bit of streaking, and I kind of want to think about where the frets would be. So if I did this as the top side, I'd have this little beautiful streak coming up here, and most of this would get cut away up here. If I have this be my show side, it's a little bit more boring. I like the interesting. I'm going to put that down. I always like to cut in this direction, and I have my 20th fret here and my first fret here, or sorry, 0 fret. This is what's going to be cut off. And so I just kind of like to get everything lined up the way I like it, placed on the board, with a little bit of room on each side. And I like to use my big blue tape for this. This isn't going to move. I can take this, pick it up, move it around. And I'm going to start at the 20th fret just because I like to do a half blind 20th, which means cutting it halfway. And after that, then I just cut through once. I only cut through on the push. I never trace it back, because as you do that, you set up a vibration in the blade and your slots become hourglassed, meaning your fret corners are not going to sit as well as they should. So you'll kind of see and pick it up, and it's going to go really quick. And just like that, I like to check everything and look over and I'll look down this side to make sure that all these are lined up, which they are, and that I've got a really nice, well-cut fingerboard, which I do, and that I didn't make the mistake and put my 20th fret over here, unless you're left-handed. I find that doing it this way, once I have it set up, I'm able to cut, 4, 5, 8, 10 fingerboards at a time if need be. Just run them through the planer, get them to about the same thickness, roughly, doesn't matter really, and then do this. So once this is off, what I'll do is find this, I'll cut this off, find my center line, and get the edges trimmed up. But unfortunately, I have to go pick up my son right now. Please like, subscribe, follow the rest of the series, and come visit me at the URI Guitar Festival. All right, I'll see you later.